You felt the shift before anyone else did. You sensed that your life was not random, not ordinary, not accidental. You have always carried an awareness that others could not explain. A weight, a calling, a quiet intensity that made you different in rooms where everyone else seemed comfortable. Have you ever wondered why you could never fully blend in? Why you saw through people so quickly? Why you felt both favored and attacked at the same time? Listen carefully. That tension is not confusion. It is confirmation. You are not here to protect your ego. You are here to dissolve it. Because ego cannot carry an anointing, and destiny cannot rest on pride. There are 9 sacred disciplines that refine the chosen. 9 internal fires that burn away illusion and awaken divine authority. Not everyone will understand them. Not everyone will endure them. Only those marked for higher calling recognize this path. This is not about self-improvement. This is about transformation. This is about warfare within so you can win warfare without. And if you already feel the pressure increasing, if you sense that life has been forcing you to confront yourself, then you are exactly where you need to be. Stay with this. Lean in. Because each discipline will expose something and free something. If this resonates deep in your spirit, you already know what to do. Align yourself. Connect. Stand with this message. The chosen recognize their own. First, ruthless self-observation that exposes the ego's masks. You have felt it. That moment after a reaction, that flash of irritation, that defensiveness rising before you can stop it. You used to justify it. You used to blame the darkness, the enemy, other people's behavior. But something shifted. You began to watch yourself, not to shame yourself, but to understand. Have you noticed how every irritation reveals a hidden demand, a need to be seen, to be right, to be respected, to be superior? Ego does not scream. It whispers. It hides behind spiritual language. It disguises itself as righteousness. But you are learning to see it, and that is warfare. Because the greatest battlefield for the chosen is not external opposition. It is internal purification. The world reacts outwardly. The chosen observe inwardly. You stop saying they made me angry. You started asking, why did that trigger me? That question changes everything, because now you are not fighting people. You are confronting pride. You are confronting insecurity. You are confronting the part of you that still wants applause. And that is sacred. Do you understand how rare this is? Most people defend their ego until the day they die. But you are dismantling it. Piece by piece, reaction by reaction. This is why rejection hit you so hard in the past. It was targeting the ego, and you thought it was targeting your worth, but now you see it differently. Rejection was training. It was stripping away false identity. It was forcing you to anchor in divine approval instead of human validation. Every time you observe instead of react, you grow. Every time you pause instead of justify, you strengthen. Awareness becomes your first weapon. And once you see the ego, it loses power. Darkness thrives in blind spots. Light thrives in exposure. You are choosing exposure. That is why the enemy cannot control you the way he controls others. Because you are watching yourself, refining yourself. Purifying motive. This is not weakness. This is authority in formation. Stay alert, stay honest, stay awake, because this is only the beginning. Second, voluntary silence that starves the need for validation. You have already felt the pull to withdraw, the sudden urge to step back, to go quiet, to disappear from spaces where performance is rewarded and comparison is constant. And part of you wondered, is this isolation? Is this loss? Is something wrong with me? No, this is refinement. The world feeds on noise, on applause, on visibility. But you were never called to be sustained by attention. You were called to be sustained by anointing. There is a difference. When you choose silence, you cut off the oxygen supply to ego. No audience, no affirmation, no external reassurance. Just you and God and truth. Have you noticed how uncomfortable that can feel? How the mind starts searching for distraction? How the flesh wants to be seen? That panic you feel in silence is not weakness. It is ego detoxing, because ego survives on being witnessed, on being praised, on being validated. But your spirit grows roots in hidden places. The chosen are not built on stages. They are forged in solitude. You thought the quiet seasons were punishment. You thought being overlooked meant being forgotten. But what if it was protection? What if the silence was shielding your calling from premature exposure? Darkness cannot attack what it cannot see clearly, and God will often hide what He intends to elevate. Isolation stops feeling like rejection when you understand it as purification. Listen carefully. When you step away from noise, comparison loses power. When you stop announcing your moves, pride loses influence. When you resist the urge to prove yourself, destiny accelerates. This is warfare most people will never fight, because most people cannot tolerate being unseen. They equate visibility with value. But you are learning something deeper. Value is internal, assignment is internal, authority is internal. Silence forces you to meet yourself without applause, without titles, without performance. Who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when no one is clapping? That answer determines how much glory you can carry, because if your identity still depends on reaction, you cannot sustain revelation. The ego panics in hidden seasons. It whispers you are falling behind. It whispers you are being forgotten. But your spirit knows better. Your spirit says you are being fortified. You are not shrinking, you are strengthening. You are not disappearing, you are deepening. There is favor in being unseen. There is power in restraint. There is authority in quiet confidence. Only the chosen recognize this paradox. Silence is not emptiness, it is preparation. And when you master being comfortable and quiet, the world loses its leverage over you. No compliment can inflate you. No criticism can crush you. Because you are no longer fed by noise. You are fed by alignment. Stand firm in your quiet seasons. Do not rush them. Do not resent them. They are building a foundation that applause never could. And if this discipline feels heavier than the first, it is because you are going deeper. The surface is gone now. You are moving inward, and inward battles produce outward authority. Stay ready, because the next discipline will challenge control itself. Third, obedience when no one is watching. This is where it becomes dangerous, because silence is one thing, but obedience in hidden places that exposes everything. You know what this feels like. Doing the right thing when it costs you. Choosing integrity when there is no reward. Holding your standard when no one would have known if you compromised. Have you ever walked away from something you could have taken? Ever kept your word when breaking it would have been easier? Ever resisted temptation in a room where nobody would have seen? That was not coincidence. That was training. The world performs when eyes are present. The chosen obey when heaven is observing. You are learning to move without applause, to act without announcement, to build without broadcasting. And your ego hates it. Because ego wants witnesses, ego wants credit, ego wants to be acknowledged. But obedience does not need validation. Obedience needs conviction. Understand this. When you choose integrity in hidden places, you are telling the enemy something. You are telling darkness that your loyalty cannot be bought, that your calling cannot be negotiated, that your destiny is not for sale. This is why you have felt tested, not tempted casually, tested strategically. Opportunities to cut corners, chances to advance faster by compromising, moments where you could have chosen recognition over righteousness, and you felt the tension. Favor versus warfare, speed versus alignment, approval versus assignment. Most people choose speed, you chose alignment, and it cost you. It cost you visibility, it cost you relationships, it cost you opportunities that looked good on the surface. But listen carefully, heaven measures what the world ignores. While others build platforms, you are building character. While others chase attention, you are cultivating authority. And authority is heavier than attention. Obedience in secret strengthens you in ways public success never could. Because if you cannot be trusted in isolation, you cannot be trusted in elevation. This is why your journey has felt slower, more intentional, more refined. It was not delay, it was construction. You were being fortified where no one could see, and that is why what is coming will not crush you. Because you are not built on hype. You are built on discipline. You act from calling, not from crowd reaction. You move because you were instructed, not because you were invited. That is rare. That is dangerous to darkness, because the enemy cannot manipulate someone who does not crave recognition. Let that sink in. When applause no longer controls you, neither can criticism. When visibility no longer drives you, neither can invisibility discourage you. You become stable, grounded, unshakable. This is how mantles are carried. This is how assignments are protected. Stand firm in hidden obedience. Do not despise it. Do not rush past it. It is proof that you are trusted with more. And if this discipline feels heavier than the last, it is because the refining is intensifying. You are not just being purified. You are being prepared for weight. And what comes next will challenge not just your actions, but your need to be right. Fourth, fasting from the need to be right. This is where the blade cuts deeper, because it is one thing to obey in secret. It is another thing to release control in public. You have felt that fire rise in conversations, that urge to correct, to clarify, to win, to prove that you see what others do not. And many times, you were right. That is what makes this discipline so sharp. You are not surrendering ignorance. You are surrendering dominance. Have you noticed how quickly your spirit tightens when misunderstood? How your mind prepares arguments before the other person finishes speaking? That reflex is not strength. It is ego defending territory. The ego feeds on control, on superiority, on being the most aware in the room. But divine authority does not compete. It does not rush to defend itself. It does not tremble at disagreement. Listen carefully. When you no longer need to win every exchange, you step into a higher realm of power. Because now you are not protecting an image. You are protecting your assignment. The world debates to elevate itself. The chosen discern to protect alignment. There were seasons when correction felt like attack, when feedback felt like disrespect, and you reacted. Sharp words, closed posture, subtle pride masked as conviction. But something began to shift. You started allowing correction without collapsing. You stopped equating being wrong with being worthless. That is maturity. That is refinement. Darkness wants you reactive. Heaven wants you stable. Can you receive input without losing identity? Can you be challenged without feeling dethroned? That is the test. Because if your ego still needs to be right, the enemy can bait you. He can pull you into arguments that drain your energy. He can trap you in proving cycles that distract from purpose. But when you fast from being right, you become untouchable. Imagine that. Untouchable. Not because you are silent, but because you are secure. Humility is not weakness. It is controlled power. It is knowing you could argue and choosing not to, knowing you could dominate and choosing restraint. That restraint builds weight in the spirit. Power grows when you no longer defend your image, when misunderstanding does not shake you, when false assumptions do not provoke you, when you trust that truth does not need frantic defense. You begin to operate from a different altitude, and at higher altitudes, petty battles cannot survive. This is heavier warfare now, because pride is subtle. It disguises itself as passion, as intelligence, as leadership. But you are discerning it. You are cutting it off at the root. Not everyone will understand this discipline. Most people equate volume with authority, but you are learning something deeper. Authority whispers, ego shouts. Light remains steady, darkness reacts, and you are becoming steady, grounded, unmoved. This is not about losing your voice. It is about mastering it. Speak when instructed, be silent when required. Release the need to prove, and watch how your presence begins to carry weight without effort. You are stepping into controlled strength, and the next discipline will test not just your voice, but your emotions. Fifth, radical responsibility for your emotional triggers. This is where power awakens, because now the battlefield moves inside your nervous system, inside your reactions, inside your wounds. You have felt it, that surge of emotion that feels automatic, that wave of anger, that sting of rejection, that sudden insecurity when someone shifts their tone. For years you thought it was them. their attitude, their behavior, their betrayal. And yes, people can wound. Yes, darkness can provoke. But hear this clearly. Your trigger is not your enemy. It is your teacher. The moment you stop assigning your wounds to other people's behavior, you take your power back completely. The world blames, the chosen examine, the world reacts, the chosen refine. Have you noticed how certain situations repeat different faces? Same feeling, different environment, same internal reaction? That is not coincidence. That is a pattern asking to be healed. Every trigger is a doorway, a hidden entrance to deeper refinement. Instead of saying, "They made me feel small," you ask, "Why does smallness still live inside me?" Instead of saying, "They disrespected me," you ask, "Why does my identity still depend on their tone?" That shift is explosive, because now warfare changes. It is no longer you versus people. It is you versus distortion, you versus old programming, you versus the lie that your pain defines you. Darkness wants you distracted by external enemies, but heaven wants you fortified internally. The moment you accept radical responsibility, you become dangerous, because now nobody can manipulate your emotional state. Nobody can control your reactions. Nobody can bait you into cycles of weakness. You start seeing your emotions as signals, not shackles. You start understanding that sensitivity is not fragility. It is awareness waiting for mastery. The chosen are not comforted. They are forged. Forged means heat, pressure, confrontation. When something triggers you now, you do not collapse. You lean in. You observe. You ask deeper questions. What is this revealing? What still needs alignment? Where is ego hiding inside this reaction? That level of honesty is rare. Most people protect their wounds. You are transforming yours. And here is the revelation. Every healed trigger increases your spiritual capacity. Every refined emotion strengthens your authority. Because emotional mastery leads to spiritual clarity, and spiritual clarity leads to decisive power. You are not just surviving reactions anymore. You are studying them, dismantling them, reclaiming territory within yourself. This is awakening. You are realizing that your greatest strength is not how loudly you fight others. It is how deeply you conquer yourself. Light over darkness, truth over distortion, authority over impulse. Stand firm in this discipline. Do not fear your triggers. Face them, interrogate them, heal them. Because the more internally stable you become, the more externally unstoppable you are. And what comes next will require that stability, because the next discipline strips away something even more subtle. Sixth, serving without spotlight. This is where ego truly begins to starve, because now you give and no one claps. You show up and no one posts about it. You pour out and nobody announces your sacrifice. Have you ever helped someone who later forgot you, ever supported a vision that did not include your name, ever carried weight that no one acknowledged? That was not loss. That was elevation. The world serves to be seen. The chosen serve because they are called. There is a difference. When you give where there is no reward, something shifts inside you. Superiority dissolves. Comparison fades. You stop measuring your value by visibility. Service refines compassion. It humbles you without humiliating you. It grounds you without shrinking you. Listen carefully. True authority is built through unseen sacrifice. Not loud gifting, not public charisma, not platform presence. Sacrifice, private obedience, hidden generosity. The enemy does not fear talent. He fears humility wrapped in power. Because when you no longer need recognition, you cannot be manipulated by it. You become stable, unmoved, dangerous. There were seasons when you felt overlooked, used, underappreciated. You wondered if you were being taken advantage of. You questioned whether your generosity was weakness. But now you see differently. Service was shaping your heart. It was cutting away entitlement. It was strengthening endurance. It was teaching you to operate from overflow, not applause. Favor follows those who no longer chase it. Let that settle. The moment you stop chasing attention, attention begins to chase you. The moment you stop demanding reward becomes attracted to you. Why? Because heaven entrusts elevation to those who will not idolize it. Service proves your motive. It tests your loyalty. It reveals whether your assignment is about impact or image. You are learning to move quietly, to bless without broadcasting, to give without calculating return. That is rare. Most people keep score. You are keeping covenant. Light serves, darkness consumes. Light builds, darkness exploits. And you are building. Even when no one sees, even when no one thanks you, even when the room forgets your contribution. Because you know something deeper now. You are not serving people, you are serving purpose. And purpose always remembers. Stand firm in quiet generosity. Do not let cynicism creep in. Do not let bitterness distort your compassion. You are not being overlooked. You are being observed by a higher measure. And when elevation comes, it will not corrupt you, because you were trained in obscurity. You were strengthened in silence. You were refined through service. This is authority without ego, power without pride, influence without insecurity. And the next discipline will confront something even more internal. Not your actions, not your reactions, but your timeline. Seventh, surrendering the timeline of your destiny. This is where control finally breaks, because you have obeyed, you have served, you have refined your reactions, and still, the promise has not fully manifested. You have felt that tension, that quiet question rising in the night. When will it shift? When will it open? When will what was spoken over your life become visible? Be honest. You have wrestled with the clock. You have compared your progress to others. You have watched people rise faster, expand quicker, receive sooner. And for a moment, ego whispered, "You are behind." But you are not behind. You are being aligned. Ego demands speed. Calling demands precision. Speed builds platforms. Alignment builds legacy. There is a difference. Waiting has felt heavy because you are not ordinary. You carry vision. You carry weight. You carry awareness of what is possible. And when you see the mountain but cannot yet stand on it, impatience tempts you. But listen carefully. Delay is not denial. It is design. Waiting stops feeling like punishment when you understand orchestration. Every closed door protected you from premature exposure. Every slow season fortified your foundation. Every stretch of silence deepened your capacity. Do you realize how dangerous you would be if you arrived too early, without maturity, without stability, without the internal architecture to hold influence? The enemy would love for you to rush, to step outside of divine timing, to force open doors that were meant to open naturally, but you resisted, even when it hurt, even when doubt tried to creep in. You chose patience, and patience is not passive. It is active trust. It is waking up every day and aligning again. It is refusing to let comparison poison your calling. It is standing firm when nothing appears to move. This is where the chosen identity solidifies. Because now your confidence is not in outcomes, it is in assignment. You know who you are even before the world sees it. You know what you carry even before it manifests. That is power, unshakable power. The world chases moments. You are stewarding destiny. The world panics when progress slows. You deepen when progress pauses. Patience becomes proof. Proof that your trust is not conditional. Proof that your loyalty is not based on speed. Proof that your faith is anchored in something eternal. Stand still. Do not force what is forming. Do not chase what is being prepared. Your timeline is protected. Your unfolding is intentional. Your emergence is precise. And when the moment comes, it will not be rushed. It will be undeniable. Because what is built slowly cannot be erased quickly. You are not late. You are layered. You are not forgotten. You are fortified. And what comes next will demand even greater stability, because the next discipline will test how you handle resistance itself. Eighth, accepting spiritual warfare without personalizing it. This is where your spine hardens, because resistance has increased, pressure intensified, opposition became more strategic, and for a moment you wondered, is something wrong with me? Why does conflict follow me? Why does tension rise when I enter certain spaces? Listen carefully. Not every attack is about your worth. It is about your threat. Darkness does not mobilize against what is average. It mobilizes against what carries light. You felt the resistance and almost shrank, almost softened your voice, almost diluted your presence. Why? Because part of you thought the warfare meant you were failing. But what if it means you are advancing? What if resistance is confirmation? Have you noticed how some people react to you before knowing you? How environments shift when you arrive? How certain spirits become uncomfortable around your calm? That is not coincidence. That is contrast. Light exposes, darkness resists. And when you personalize the resistance, ego tries to defend itself. It tries to argue, to prove, to fight from insecurity. But when you understand that warfare is positional, not personal, something shifts. You stop shrinking to make darkness comfortable. You stop apologizing for your clarity. You stop adjusting your boundaries to ease other people's demons. This is the pivot, because now you are not reacting emotionally. You are discerning spiritually. You realize the battle is not flesh and blood. It is alignment versus distortion, truth versus deception, calling versus compromise. And once you see that clearly, fear loses its grip. You are not being attacked because you are weak. You are being resisted because you are effective. Let that settle in your spirit. The enemy does not waste resources on the insignificant. The pressure you feel is evidence of impact. So stand firm. Do not internalize what was never yours to carry. Do not question your value because opposition increased. Opposition is often proof of proximity to breakthrough. When ego dissolves, you fight differently. Not from wounded pride, not from the need to defend your image, but from identity, steady, grounded, certain. You do not panic when warfare surfaces. You recognize it. You adjust, you fortify, you advance. The world personalizes conflict. The chosen interpret it. The world withdraws when pressure rises. The chosen become sharper, because now you understand something powerful. You are spiritually dangerous, not loud, not dramatic, but anchored. And anchored people cannot be easily shaken. The resistance you feel is not random, it is reaction. Darkness reacts to light. Distortion reacts to clarity. And you carry clarity. Do not shrink. Do not dilute. Do not negotiate your calling to make others comfortable. You were not designed to be comfortable. You were designed to confront. And this awareness makes you unstoppable. Because when you stop taking warfare personally, you stop bleeding energy unnecessarily. You conserve strength. You move strategically. You rise above emotional traps. This is the pressure before ignition, and the final discipline will demand the ultimate surrender. Not behavior, not reaction, but identity itself. Ninth, dying to the old self so the mantle can descend. This is the fire, not refinement, not adjustment, death. You have felt it coming. That sense that who you used to be cannot follow you where you are going. Old reactions already fell. Old validation patterns already broke. Old timelines already surrendered. But this is deeper. There is a final surrender where your former identity cannot survive. Not your mistakes, not your wounds, your identity. The version of you built on survival. The version of you shaped by rejection. The version of you that learned to adapt to environments that misunderstood you. It must die. Because mantles do not rest on fractured foundations. They rest on surrendered vessels. Ego does not negotiate. It does not politely step aside. It must be crucified. And crucifixion is not comfortable. It feels like loss. It feels like emptiness. It feels like standing in a space where nothing familiar remains. Have you felt that stripping, that sensation of becoming no one before, becoming who you truly are? That is not collapse. That is transition. Darkness whispers you are losing yourself. Heaven declares you are shedding illusion. When you release who you were, divine authority rests on who you are becoming. But you cannot carry both. You cannot hold on to old validation and receive new weight. You cannot cling to outdated identity and expect expanded influence. The old self was built to survive. The new self is built to govern. And governance requires death to insecurity, death to pride, death to fear. This is why the pressure intensified. This is why warfare escalated, because something is descending, and only empty hands can receive it. Only surrendered hearts can steward it. You are not being erased, you are being elevated. But elevation feels like disappearance before manifestation. Stand still in the fire. Do not run back to familiarity. Do not resurrect the version of you that no longer fits. Let it burn, let it fall, let it finish. Because this is where destiny ignites, not in applause, not in recognition, in surrender. Only the chosen endure this fire. Only the marked survive this transformation. And you are still here. That alone confirms it. You are chosen, not by accident, not by emotion, by design. Every rejection prepared you. Every delay fortified you. Every battle strengthened you. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was random. Nothing formed against you has prevailed. Stand firm now. Walk boldly now. Comment 9 if you know the fire refined you instead of destroying you. Declare it. Seal it. Subscribe if you are ready to walk this path fully awakened. Because this is not information. This is activation. You were never ordinary. You were never overlooked. You were being forged. And now the mantle descends. And nothing in darkness can stop what heaven has sealed.